Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Means and I'm a criminologist. I recently watched the movie Joker and I was blown away. The story was intriguing and the acting was out of this world. So I thought it would be fun to do a criminal analysis of Joker based on the information we see in the movie. So this is not the same as a criminal profile. Generally, when we're creating a criminal profile, we're working backwards from a crime scene. We're looking at how the crime was committed, what weapon was used, and any other circumstantial evidence we have to determine a profile of the offender we're looking for. Instead, I'll be doing a criminal analysis of Arthur, looking at the risk factors he had and the behaviors he was exhibiting that were indicators that he was going to commit a crime, specifically a violent crime. Before we jump in, if you haven't seen the movie Joker yet, there is a spoiler alert in effect. So what indicators did we see in Arthur that could tell us that he was headed down the path of committing a violent crime? Right off the bat, we can tell that his behavior is odd. He doesn't seem to have much of a social life, he talks with a few people at work, but the main person in his life is his mother. And it's clear that Arthur and his mother have a codependent relationship, meaning they are excessively reliant on each other for either emotional or psychological reasons. We see that he is bringing her food and giving her a bath, which makes us suspect that maybe she's disabled. But we later see her walking and even dancing, meaning that Arthur is not doing these acts out of necessity, but rather because he wants to. This was a red flag for me, indicating that there was likely some kind of childhood trauma that happened in Arthur's past, and that his mother may have been subject to trauma as well. When two people go through something traumatic together, they can form what we call a trauma bond, where they are relying on each other to survive during the traumatic time, and then it causes them to become codependent, so they continue being reliant on each other even after the trauma ends. This also explains why Arthur struggles with boundaries. We see examples of this when he stalks Sophie and when he shows up to the Wayne Manor and interacts with the young Bruce, even going as far as putting his fingers in the boy's mouth. Another indicator that Arthur experienced childhood trauma was when we saw the line in his joke diary reading, "I just hope my death makes more sense than my life." And sense is spelled wrong. We actually see him do this twice in the movie. He spells it the way that you would for coins rather than for how we understand something in our mind. It's likely that Arthur is not good at spelling because he suffered from a learning disability as a result of childhood trauma. It's also likely that Arthur attended a poorly funded school that was unable to accommodate him and his learning disability because he's from a lower socioeconomic status. A third indicator of Arthur's childhood trauma was the strange condition he has where he laughs uncontrollably, where it doesn't match his emotions. On the card he hands to the woman on the bus, it states that it's likely caused by a brain injury or a neurological condition. So why do these indicators matter? What is it about childhood trauma, such as physical, sexual, or emotional abuse and traumatic brain injuries, that can indicate that someone may be prone to committing a crime? Well, when someone experiences childhood trauma and/or brain injuries, it can cause certain behaviors to develop that cause them to be more susceptible to committing crimes. For Arthur, he developed antisocial behavior and low arousal. We see that he has antisocial behavior because he's unable to show empathy for others and he exhibits manipulative behaviors. But Arthur goes further than just having antisocial behavior. He also shows signs of being a psychopath, and that he's unable to distinguish right from wrong. He has little to no regard for the consequences of his actions, and he doesn't feel any remorse or empathy when he kills any of his victims. He is also suffering from low arousal. This is why we see Arthur become so charismatic after he commits a crime. Each time that he kills someone, afterwards, he can be seen dancing and smiling. Arousal doesn't always have to be in a sexual form. It can be feeling excitement or a rush of exhilaration. Although it is likely that Arthur is sexually aroused by the act of murder because after he kills the three men on the subway, he goes to Sophie's apartment and pursues her sexually. So why do behaviors such as antisocial behavior and low arousal increase someone's chances of offending? Since people with antisocial behavior are unable to empathize with others, there's a much higher chance that they will not be deterred from committing a crime, especially a violent crime, because they will not be able to put themselves in the other person's shoes and think, I wouldn't want this to happen to me, so I shouldn't do it to them. And they won't be able to feel bad or sad when they see someone else in pain. They also tend to be more manipulative and can be pathological liars. This can lead people to be more comfortable with lying to cover up a committed crime. We see this when Arthur speaks to the detectives outside the hospital when they are asking about the subway murders. Arthur is not reacting in a typical way that a person without any behavioral issues would. Generally, if someone is approached after they have committed a crime and they are attempting to lie to cover it up, they will be overly nice and want to come off as helpful. They will generally have intense eye contact because they are watching your face to see if you are believing their lie. They may also try to distance themselves from the victim, such as the way that Bill Clinton did when talking about Monica Lewinsky.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
He's distancing himself by calling her that woman rather than saying her name. Arthur, on the other hand, acts like he doesn't have the time of day for these guys, and rather turns the blame on them, saying that they are responsible for his mother being in the hospital. He doesn't have the capacity to feel nervous about being questioned, and in his mind, he was completely justified for killing the 3 men on the subway, so he has nothing to feel guilty about. Low arousal can cause individuals to be more prone to committing crimes because they may need to engage in high-risk activities to be able to feel emotions. Now, this doesn't always present in criminal acts. It can also be individuals who are thrill seekers, who engage in activities such as skydiving, bull riding, and other extreme sports. We also often see low arousal in individuals who work in high-risk jobs, such as on Wall Street. In the case of Arthur, he is getting his thrills through the act of killing another human being. There are also signs that Arthur is suffering from a mental illness. When he is with a social worker, we hear her say that Arthur is on 7 different medications, likely to treat his mental illnesses. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but from the research I've done on this character, I've concluded that he likely has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and borderline personality disorder. The bipolar can explain his mood swings throughout the movie, how at some point he seems very down and depressed, and others he's very charismatic and manic. His schizophrenia causes him to have hallucinations, such as how he fabricated his entire relationship with Sophie, and is likely causing paranoia. It's clear that a trigger for Arthur is when he is lied to or when someone accuses him of lying. This is likely worsened by his paranoia in that he probably thinks that everyone around him has ill intent and is lying to him. This is likely what ultimately led him to killing his mother. The borderline personality disorder causes him to imitate others as a way to try and seem normal. I think they show this really well in 2 different scenes in the movie. The first is when he's taking notes at the comedy club. He has a hard time figuring out what normal behavior looks like. We see him laughing at the wrong time, and he's taking notes of what kind of jokes make the crowd laugh. The second scene is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. Arthur is getting ready to go on the Maury show, and he's practicing his entrance in his living room by watching a tape of a previous guest on the show. He's imitating the man on TV to know when to wave, when to shake hands with Maury, and even how to sit once he gets to the chair. The level of detail in this scene really blew me away. Joaquin Phoenix is such a phenomenal actor, and he really captured the amount of overthinking that's happening in this character's mind, and how his movements are almost robotic and unnatural, because instead of being in the moment, he's just thinking about how to position his body to essentially look normal. It's so good. So fantastic. Okay, I'll move on. Now, this does bring up one area where I have a bone to pick with this movie. I'm worried that it's representing mental illness as an indicator for violent crime, when in reality, those who suffer from mental illness are much more likely to be the victim of a crime rather than the perpetrator. So I really hope that that wasn't anyone's takeaway from the movie, because it's just not accurate. So far, we've looked at what Arthur's criminogenic risk factors were, and we know what crimes Arthur commits in the movie. So now we can determine which theory of criminology best describes why Arthur offended in the first place. We can rule some of them out right off the bat. It's unlikely to be any kind of social learning theory, such as differential association, because his criminal behavior was not learned from another person. We can also rule out strain and enemy theory, since he wasn't committing crimes in order to reach some kind of goal. If we look at how Arthur was behaving, we could say that he was disconnected from society, that he no longer cared about the rules and laws, or as we would call it, the control that society has on him. So everyone in society, we all agree to follow a certain societal contract, where we agree to follow the same rules and laws. According to the control theory, when someone breaks that bond with society, they will begin to offend. Oftentimes, the catalyst for this bond breaking are weak social bonds, which can be with family, employment, school, or their community. When Arthur is attacked by the men at the beginning of the movie, that event could have been the catalyst that began breaking his bonds with society. Individuals who commit crimes according to the control theory also demonstrate a lack of self-control. We can see this in how Arthur is carrying out the murders he commits. He doesn't care that there are people around to witness the murders, nor does he fear the consequences of his actions. A second theory of criminology, which is a possible explanation for Arthur's criminal behavior, would be the biosocial theory, which states that both an individual's biological factors and sociological factors influence someone's chances of offending. The behaviors we discussed earlier, of him having antisocial behavior and low arousal, account for those biological factors. It's possible that there's a genetic component, but we now know that Arthur was adopted, and we don't have a medical history of his birth parents, so it would be speculation. The sociological factors that can influence someone's chances of offending are similar to those in the control theory, such as their family, community, their place of employment, or if they are part of any kind of religious institution. I think for the first part of the movie, the relationship that Arthur had with his mother was helping him not offend. But as the movie goes on and he learns that his mother has been lying to him, he no longer has that relationship to help guide him in making good decisions. And he even goes as far as killing her. The 3 men that he killed on the subway when his relationship with his mother was still intact were not killed in the same way that his mother, Randall, or Murray were. On the subway, he was being physically assaulted by the 3 men, and he acted in self-defense, at least for the first 2, so they could be classified as justifiable homicides. When he pursued the last man who was getting away, it no longer fell into that realm of self-defense. Instead, he was acting with malice intent, and it would be charged as second-degree murder. But we can say with some confidence that if the men weren't physically assaulting him on the subway, he would not have killed them in the first place. Now, we can't say the same for the other people he killed in the movie after his relationship with his mother was no longer intact. When Arthur killed his mother, Randall, and Murray, he did it with premeditation and with malice intent, which would likely be charged as first-degree murder. So now we have just done this whole analysis of Arthur. So what can we determine about his criminal analysis? Well, he's a middle-aged white male with antisocial behavior and low arousal, leading to the inability to show remorse or empathy. He disregards consequences, and he engages in high-risk behaviors. He shows signs of psychopathy and has difficulty determining right from wrong. He likely suffers from other mental illnesses as well. He no longer adheres to the control placed on him by society and has no regard for the law or law enforcement. Because of this, we can determine that if Arthur is not immediately placed in a psychiatric facility, that he will continue to engage in violent criminal behavior. Sorry, Arthur. Now, my husband brought up a really interesting point that I think might actually carry some weight. Arthur is suffering from schizophrenia, and he has episodes of acute psychosis where he hallucinates. The movie is shown from Arthur's perspective, so it's very likely that we are seeing what he is believing in his mind. When we are shown that his relationship with Sophie was a hallucination, I believe that was a way for the directors to tell us, the audience, that we had an unreliable narrator and that we couldn't trust what we were seeing. If it's true that Arthur's schizophrenic psychosis was getting worse throughout the movie, then his mental state should have been declining as well. He shouldn't have been able to put his thoughts together, and he certainly shouldn't have been organized enough to get dressed properly, apply makeup to his face, effectively evade the police, go on the Murray Show, engage in a conversation where he acted very charismatic, and then murder someone. My husband and I theorize that what we see at the end of the movie is likely all happening in Arthur's head. If you think about it, he's accomplishing all of his dreams and goals from the movie. He told the social worker that no one ever listens to him, and then at the end of the movie, he literally has an audience and is on live TV having people listen to him. He is able to metaphorically kill the rich elite by killing Murray, and he's saved by the crowd at the end and regarded as a hero, as a way to validate himself. Evidence that this theory is true can also be seen when he's doing stand-up at Pogo's Comedy Club. When he's finally able to start telling jokes after his laughing spell, the scene fades to an almost dreamlike state. His voice is replaced by music, and we can hear the laughter of the crowd. We are left with the impression that his set went really well, but the reality is we are likely seeing things from how Arthur saw them in his head. The fact that Murray was making fun of his set on his show is an indicator that it didn't go as well as Arthur may have thought. I also think that the people in the background of Gotham throughout the movie represent Arthur's mental state. So in the beginning, they have unrest, there's a garbage strike, and there are giant rats everywhere. Towards the middle of the movie, people are starting to protest and getting very agitated. And then at the end, it's full out chaos. So I think that the crowds in the movie are representing Arthur's mental state, where in the beginning, he's kind of agitated. In the middle, he's starting to lose control. And by the end, it's full chaos. Now, of course, this is all just our fun little theory about the movie, but let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. If there's another character from a movie or a TV show that you'd like me to do a criminal analysis of, let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to learn more information about me or take a listen to my educational podcast on criminology and criminal justice reform, check out my website at crisisofcrime.com. You'll also find a link to our Patreon page there if you are interested in supporting the channel and the podcast. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.